lost in the sands of the NHL news cycle, behind all of the big stories like Edmonton, the Sharks, the Canucks dominance, and all in between, aka pretty much everything we're just talking about here on the channel. Lost behind all of that is an update regarding one of the best NHL players in history. He's a top 100 guy of all time, arguably the best American player ever, and a superstar who had been sidelined for the beginning of this season, citing a full recovery from hip surgery. He's been recovering, he's been getting healthy, and we have ourselves some updates as to what his future could hold. Let's talk today about former Chicago Blackhawk and New York Ranger Patrick Kane, and the newest scoop as to what's been revealed in the media as to where he could be going next. Now, as we did say, Patrick Kane has been sidelined for all of this season. He has been recovering from hip surgery, and he's a guy who, coming off of last season's point production of 57 points in, 73 games played, he should be considered still a very valuable hockey player. He was good with the Rangers, he was under a point per game there. Even in 21-22, so 2 seasons ago, he was at 92 points, and he did that playing in the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, we've had our conversations over the past few months as to where Kane would get traded to at the 2023 trade deadline, and then we also talked about which team would sign Kane in the offseason, but up to this point, he has not signed yet, and we had ourselves some updates from Chris Johnston on TSN as to where things could be going next. Take a look at the insider trading segment from earlier this week, or yesterday, on Friday. Yeah, that's when it was. Insider trading. A trade cannot fix what's broken in Toronto. The link to this video is going to be in the description if you want to go ahead and watch the TV segment yourself, and I'll also leave a link in the description to this article on The Score, written by Josh Wegman, that pretty much summarizes what it is that is written about in regards to Kane. So, the title of the piece reads this: Report, Rangers and the Red Wings are among teams in the mix for Patrick Kane, and I'll say that the picture that they used in the thumbnail of this article is probably the most unflattering thing I've seen of Patrick Kane. Maybe ever? Oh boy, the angle of his mouth when he's got his jaw extended like that, yeah, it's not really natural, but either way, the article goes out there and writes what Chris Johnston said on TSN regarding Kane, as the list of potential suitors appears to be narrowed down to just 4. The Rangers and the Red Wings have entered the sweepstakes for the UFA free agent winger, reports Chris Johnston. The Sabres and the Panthers, who were previously reported to be interested, remain in the hunt. Kane finished the 22-23 campaign with the Rangers, yada yada yada, and it then talks about the different situations, the financial gymnastics, etc., etc. To help us out a little bit further as to this idea, though, we're referring to a tweet made by NHL Watcher on Twitter, citing the same Chris Johnston TSN TV hit, from yesterday. Johnston says on Insider Trading the 4 main contenders for Kane are the Sabres, because they're his hometown team, the Rangers, because they're the team that he requested to be traded to last season, the Wings, because of the Alex DeBrincat situation, and the Florida Panthers, because Kane has ties to Bill Zito. So, it's interesting to have the checklist here as to why these 4 teams are the 4 teams. If it is a Buffalo Sabres hometown reunion situation, then I'm very interested in seeing what a Tage Thompson-Patrick Kane duo could look like, how a Casey Mittelstadt-Kane pairing would look like. Casey Mittelstadt has been the best Buffalo Sabre on paper this year in terms of overall point production, and this is a guy who many touted to having a very similar Patrick Kane-like playstyle. Skinnier forward, more of a playmaker, very soft hands, and just quick feet to match it all up together. Casey Mittelstadt is like a carbon copy of what Patrick Kane is supposed to be, which would make it really interesting if you had these 2 guys playing on the same team. Who knows if that would be overkill? Like, would you even want to try to explore that kind of a dynamic? Maybe it would be too much, maybe it wouldn't really work out. But of course, if Patrick Kane, of all people, wants to sign with his hometown team, who are the Buffalo Sabres to go out there and say no? When it comes to the other teams, though, the Rangers are in a particularly interesting spot because they are a wagon this year. Oh my gosh, the Rangers have been so good. And, I mean, look, they're top of the NHL right now, Or is that technically correct? Top of the NHL? They're 4th, whatever. Top of the NHL, tied with Vancouver for 3rd in the league. They're one of the best teams. They're a well-oiled machine. Everything is clicking for the Rangers. And the question is, if you bring in a guy like Patrick Kane, how much does that actually increase your chances of going forward? The reason I say it like that is because your team is already so darn good. You have to question, do you even really need a Patrick Kane? If he comes over onto your team, do you force him into the top 6? Do you try to adjust what has already been working? You already have Blake Wheeler, who finally scored his first goal the other night, but he, holistically, has not had a great season so far. So would you want to risk it with another one of these one-year, cheap, older guys that had their heyday but are no longer in that position? I mean, if you want to add to a team that's already really great, be my guest. There's nothing really the Rangers, I think, could do wrong in this situation, but you kind of have to ask, is Patrick Kane the guy who will provide the biggest, most baddest impact on a team like the Rangers? If you change it over to a team like the Florida Panthers, for example, hey, this team, they're not as good as the Red Wings, they're not as good as the Rangers, they're just outside in the wild card. And if you wanted to talk about what Patty Kane could add to a team that already has guys like Matthew Tkachuk, 2 great American players right there, that could be pretty good, Alexander Barkov, see how things work out in that respect, it would be interesting to see more of a Kane playmaking style add itself onto that team. Jonathan Huberdeau was an astounded playmaker in the Florida Panthers system, generating chances off the rush. Patrick Kane maybe has a little bit more of a possession-based game to his playmaking. Is that going to translate well to a Bill Zito Florida Panthers system? I'm not really too sure. But if it does work out, I feel like for Patrick Kane in Florida, there's a lot more opportunity for him to be more important. Like, if Kane goes to New York, let's say, I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. But if he goes over to a team like Florida or even Detroit, all of a sudden, that's a huge add and somebody that could make a big impact right away. Speaking about those Red Wings, this is one of the teams with the highest cap space in the NHL, so they probably have the easiest route to signing a guy like Patrick Kane, and they have the biggest connection too, I feel. Of course, you can't beat your hometown roots, but that Alex DeBrincat connection that everybody's been talking about that allowed Patrick Kane to get 90 points a few seasons ago too, that's still there. And for a guy like DeBrincat, who has been on a pretty bad slump ever since starting out the season as one of the hottest players in the NHL, he could use some love. And I feel like if you get Patrick Kane onto this team, playing with Larkin, playing with DeBrincat, have a new first line, move Lucas Raymond to the second line, because I'm sorry, Raymond, that's just kind of how it goes, maybe you could try to ignite that spark in DeBrincat once more. And maybe Larkin gets in on the action and starts producing like crazy again, too. Lucas Raymond, your time will come, but if the Red Wings are the team that ends up landing Patrick Kane, I feel like this opportunity of DeBrincat Kane getting reunited is so grand that you have to take it. You have to see what it does, and you have to see what kind of impact it could have for an Atlantic team that's really interesting, because they have been losing a lot lately. They're 4-4-2 in their last 10, but they're still second in the division. Now, of course, they're tied with Tampa Bay. They're 1 point ahead of Florida, so maybe it's not the most guaranteed thing in the world. They have come back down to earth ever since the hot start. But adding Patrick Kane, I feel like Florida, this could be one of the better situations for Kane in terms of building himself a 23-24 that's noteworthy. Going over to New York is not going to give him that opportunity. Going over to Buffalo, I'm not really too sure if they're good enough to take advantage of that to its full extent, plus some of the playmaking concerns, the styles of play clashing on that team. Not too sure if it's the most ideal situation. I'd say Florida, I'd say Detroit might be more interesting to think about, but of course, that is just me. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about either of these 4 teams going out there and acquiring Patrick Kane? These are the 4 finalists, it appears, based off of what Chris Johnston said on TSN. If you're a Red Wings, a Panthers, a Knights, not a Knights, oh my gosh, a Rangers, and or a Sabres fan, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Patrick Kane. Do you want this guy in your team? If so, where does he slot into your lineup? Who moves? Who goes down? Where does Patrick Kane play and who does he play with? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.